Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. Whether you're a beginner or somewhere in the middle of your English learning journey, we're thrilled to have you with us today. I'm Agnes, and I'll be one of your hosts.
And I'm Jasper. It's always exciting to have a group of curious learners tuning in. Thank you for joining us, and we're so glad you're here to share this conversation with us. So, Agnes, what are we diving into today?
Great question, Jasper. Today, we're tackling a really special topic that I think every English learner will find useful, and that's how to learn English phrasal verbs. Now, I know phrasal verbs might sound a little intimidating at first, but trust us, by the end of this, we're going to make it feel like second nature.
Absolutely. Phrasal verbs are these Littleton or three-word phrases that native speakers use all the time. They're everywhere in conversations, in movies, in books basically. They're a huge part of everyday English.
That's so true, Jasper. And the thing with phrasal verbs is that they can often be a bit confusing because the words don't always mean exactly what they would on their own. For example, give up doesn't mean you're giving something to someone. It actually means to quit or to stop trying. That's why we thought it would be helpful to break down this topic and help our listeners feel more confident when they hear or use phrasal verbs.
Exactly. So, for everyone listening, don't worry if phrasal verbs seem a bit tricky right now. We're going to go through this in a way that makes it easy to understand and fun to practice. And let's not forget to thank everyone watching this podcast, whether you're listening from home, during a commute, or even at the gym. We're here to make English learning enjoyable and relatable.
Yes, thank you so much for being here and for choosing to learn with us. All right. So let's start by explaining what a phrasal verb actually is and why it's such an important part of English. Phrasal verbs are combinations of a verb and one or two particles, which could be prepositions or adverbs. Together, they create a new meaning.
Right. And these little phrases can make your English sound a lot more natural. Instead of always using formal language, which is totally fine, you can use phrasal verbs to sound more like a native speaker. Plus, you'll hear them everywhere, so learning them can really help you understand conversations better.
Absolutely, Jasper. And I think one of the most amazing things about learning phrasal verbs is that it helps you move from basic English to more natural English. For example, instead of saying, "I will stop trying," you can say, "I will give up." It sounds simple, but it actually brings a lot of color to the way you speak.
That's a great example, and it's true phrasal verbs can make a huge difference in how you're understood and how you understand others. So let's dive in with a few examples and see how they work in real-life situations.
Perfect. One common phrasal verb that people come across is pick up. Now, pick by itself means to choose something, like I'll pick an apple. But when we add up to make pick up, it means something different. Pick up can mean to physically lift something, like pick up the book, or it can also mean to learn something new, as in I picked up some Spanish while I was traveling.
Exactly. Pick up is one of those versatile phrasal verbs that you'll hear all the time. And here's another one, run into. Now, run means to move quickly, but when we add into, it means something completely different. Run into means to meet someone by chance. Like, I ran into an old friend at the store. It's so common in casual conversation.
Yes, run into is such a useful one. And another very common phrasal verb is look after. Here, look means to see, right? But look after means to take care of someone or something. Like, can you look after my dog while I'm away? It's a different meaning entirely, but it's used a lot in English.
Absolutely. Phrasal verbs are all about learning these new meanings that come up when you put words together. It's like they take on a whole new life, and sometimes learning the stories behind them can actually help them stick in your memory.
That's such a good point. Jasper, for example, if you know that break usually means to separate or cause something to stop working, it might help you remember that breakdown can mean when something, like a machine, stops working. So if your car stops running, you'd say, "My car broke down."
Exactly. And once you start to see the patterns in phrasal verbs, it really helps. They're not all random, there are some hints that you can learn over time. And the more you hear them, the more natural they'll feel.
And for those of you listening, don't feel like you need to memorize every phrasal verb all at once. Just start by listening to how native speakers use them and practicing a few at a time. You'll be surprised at how much you'll pick up naturally.
Right? And practice is key. Maybe start by writing down a few phrasal verbs that you find interesting or that you hear a lot. Try making sentences with them, even if they feel a little strange at first. Over time, they'll start to feel more natural.
I love that approach, Jasper. It's like building your own little library of expressions that you can pull from in conversations. And as you get comfortable, you can add more to your vocabulary and sound even more fluent.
Absolutely. And remember, language is all about expression. It's about sharing your thoughts, ideas, and feelings in a way that feels true to you. Phrasal verbs are just another tool to help you do that.
Exactly. And we're here to make that journey easier and more enjoyable for you.
All right. So we were talking about how phrasal verbs can really add that extra layer of natural flow to your English. It's like adding spices to a dish that give your language that unique flavor. And just like Agnes said, these verbs aren't just words, they're expressions. They bring life and personality to the language. Now, let's dive a little deeper into why phrasal verbs are so important and maybe even look at some strategies to make learning them easier.
Yes, exactly. Phrasal verbs are part of what makes English. Well, English. They're used so often by native speakers that knowing them really helps with understanding movies, songs, and even everyday conversations. Imagine this: you're watching a movie and a character says, "Let's hang out." If you know that hang out means to spend time with someone socially, the whole scene becomes a lot clearer, right?
Totally. And let's face it, English can sometimes feel a bit formal or rigid when we're just using basic vocabulary. Phrasal verbs give you that casual, conversational edge. They help you sound like you're really in tune with the language, like you're part of a community of English speakers. And don't worry if they feel a bit strange at first. I mean, let's take hang out again. If you think about the literal meaning of hang and out, it doesn't make much sense. But once you understand it as a phrase, it's like a door opening into more natural English.
That's a great way to put it, Jasper. A door opening. And when you start to understand these phrasal verbs, it's like you're connecting to the culture, too. Each phrasal verb carries a bit of everyday life with it. For example, catch up. You'd say, "Let's catch up" to mean you want to reconnect and talk about what's been going on in each other's lives. It's casual, friendly, and it shows that you're interested in the other person.
Absolutely. And catch up is one of those verbs that can make you feel closer to someone. You're not just having a conversation, you're sharing. And the great thing is that once you start recognizing these phrasal verbs, they become like little shortcuts in understanding and speaking.
Yes, and it's funny, Jasper, because even native English speakers don't realize how many phrasal verbs they use daily. But for learners, it's about building that awareness and getting comfortable with these phrases. It's all about practice and exposure. Maybe you hear someone say, "I need to figure out what's going on." Over time, you'll learn that figure out means to solve or understand something, and soon you'll be using it yourself.
And that's another great example. Figure out is so common. And once you're comfortable with it, it just slips naturally into conversation. But you don't have to learn all phrasal verbs at once. Sometimes focusing on a few key ones and practicing them in different ways helps a lot. Start with ones you'll use daily, like put on for wearing clothes, turn off for electronics, or give up if you're talking about quitting a habit or something that's just not working out.
Exactly, Jasper. And once you have a few of these down, they'll come up naturally in conversation. Another tip that could help is thinking about phrasal verbs in categories. For example, phrasal verbs related to getting ready like put on, take off, or try on for clothes and shoes. Or maybe phrasal verbs related to communication like speak up, bring up, or talk over. This way, you're grouping them by context, which can make them easier to remember.
I love that idea, Agnes. Grouping phrasal verbs by themes is a great way to practice. Plus, you start to understand that a single verb, like take, can be used in so many different ways just by adding a small word, like off or up. For example, take off can mean removing something, like a jacket, but it can also mean when a plane leaves the ground. And then there's take up, like when you decide to start a new hobby, as in I've decided to take up painting.
Yes, isn't that so interesting? Just by adding one little word, the whole meaning shifts. And these small changes are powerful because they can add so much more detail to what you're saying. Like with take off for a plane or take off for a new activity, it's a little bit of creativity that makes your language richer and more expressive.
Definitely, and it's also about adapting to real situations. Think about this. Let's say you're in a restaurant and you hear someone say, "I'm just going to dig in." Now, dig usually means to make a hole, but dig in here means to start eating. Understanding phrasal verbs like these means you won't feel left out or confused in real-life settings, like restaurants, gatherings, or even small talk.
Exactly, Jasper. And the more you understand, the easier it becomes to connect with others. Language isn't just about rules, it's about building connections. When you're comfortable using these phrases, you can join conversations more confidently, and that's the magic of phrasal verbs. And for anyone listening, remember it's all about practice and being patient with yourself. You don't have to be perfect right away, just keep listening and practicing.
Well said, Agnes. It's like building a toolkit. You add a new tool with each phrasal verb, and soon you'll have everything you need to navigate different conversations. And once you start using them, it's so rewarding. You'll feel that boost of confidence when you realize, hey, I understood that. Or I just used a phrasal verb like a native speaker.
Exactly, Jasper. It's those little moments that make the journey worthwhile. And for everyone listening, don't forget to jot down some of these phrasal verbs we're mentioning today. Try them out in your own conversations, whether you're talking to a friend or even just practicing by yourself.
Yes, try to play around with them. You might even try making up sentences with a few new phrasal verbs each day. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just about getting comfortable with them. And think of it this way, every time you use a phrasal verb correctly, it's a small victory in your language journey.
Absolutely. Small steps lead to big improvements, and we're here to celebrate those wins with you. So, let's keep building that toolkit together and learning more about these fascinating little expressions that make English so lively.
Agnes, you're absolutely right. Each small step does count. And speaking of taking steps, let's talk more about ways to practice phrasal verbs so they really stick. You know, sometimes it's helpful to practice them in everyday scenarios. For example, if you're at home and you're cleaning, you could think of the phrasal verbs you'd naturally use in that context, like pick up, put away, or clean up. This makes it easier to remember them because you're connecting the verbs to real actions.
Great point, Jasper. Connecting phrasal verbs to actions you're already doing makes it feel less like learning and more like doing. So, when you're putting dishes in the sink, think about the phrasal verb wash up. Or when you're organizing your room, use tidy up. This helps make them second nature. And even better, it builds confidence because you're actively using the language in your daily routine.
Exactly. And the more you do this, the more natural it becomes. You'll find yourself thinking in English, not just translating back and forth. And honestly, that's one of the biggest steps towards fluency thinking in the language you're learning. So, if you're getting ready to head out of the house, say it out loud. I'm heading out. Or if you're about to relax after a long day, you can say, I'm winding down.
Yes, and sometimes it's the sound of phrasal verbs that makes them memorable. They're often short and catchy. Hang out, chill out, look up. They're phrases you can imagine people saying. It makes English feel approachable and friendly. Plus, these expressions bring personality to conversations. For example, when you say, let's chill out, you're not just saying relax. You're expressing a kind of vibe, an attitude.
Exactly, Agnes. And that's why I love them so much. They aren't just words, they carry a tone. Like with give up, it sounds final, like letting go. Or given has a different feel, it suggests a gentle surrender. There's so much you can convey just by using the right phrasal verb. And for everyone listening, you'll start to notice this more as you practice. It's not only about understanding the meaning. It's also about feeling the tone and intention behind each phrase.
Yes, it's almost like they have personalities of their own, right? And once you get familiar with their personalities, you'll know when and how to use them. And that's really what makes English so enjoyable to learn. It's like learning a dance. You start with the steps, and then you move with the rhythm.
Well said, Agnes. And speaking of moving with the rhythm, here's another tip that I think can really help. Listen to how native speakers use phrasal verbs. Pay attention to movies, songs, or conversations where you hear them naturally. You might hear a character say, I can't keep up, and realize they're talking about struggling to follow or match someone's speed. Hearing these phrases in context can make them easier to remember and use.
Absolutely. Songs, in particular, are a great tool because music helps reinforce language. Take a song lyric like, I won't give up on us. You hear give up, and it just clicks. Music is wonderful because it often repeats phrases, giving you multiple chances to remember them.
That's so true, Agnes. And even though phrasal verbs can be tricky because they don't always make sense word for word, hearing them in different contexts can really help. Let's take the phrasal verb run into, for example. If you're watching a show and a character says, I ran into my friend at the store, you learn that run into means to meet someone unexpectedly. This is a much more memorable way to learn than just reading it in a dictionary.
Exactly, Jasper. And for anyone listening, if you enjoy watching shows or listening to music, consider it part of your language practice. You can learn and enjoy yourself at the same time, and don't feel pressured to remember everything right away. Focus on understanding the context first, and then the meaning will follow naturally.
Yes, that's the beauty of phrasal verbs, they grow on you. And remember, no one expects you to be perfect immediately. Just use what you know, and your understanding will deepen with time. Even native speakers sometimes need to clarify phrasal verbs in new contexts. They're flexible, and you can play around with them as you get more comfortable.
I couldn't agree more. Jasper, it's all about progress, not perfection. And here's another fun way to practice. Try using phrasal verbs in little daily challenges. For instance, challenge yourself to describe your morning using 3 different phrasal verbs. You could say, I woke up, brushed off the sleep, and started my day by making coffee. Just a small exercise, but it keeps you thinking and using new phrases.
Great idea, Agnes. Little challenges like that can make such a big difference. And to add to that, maybe even try writing a mini journal entry with phrasal verbs you learned. For example, you might write, Today, I worked on a project and had to look up some information. Then I took a break and went out for a walk. The more you practice, the more these phrases will become part of your vocabulary.
I love that, Jasper. writing is such a powerful tool for learning because it lets you practice at your own pace. And for those who enjoy creative activities, try to make a story using 5 or 6 phrasal verbs. You can get creative. Maybe it's about a day where everything turned out differently than expected, or maybe you had to deal with an unexpected situation. It's all about making it fun and engaging.
Exactly. And the best part is, as you get more confident, you'll find yourself naturally using these phrases in conversations. It won't feel like an effort anymore. It'll just flow. And that's when you know you're really making progress. So keep trying, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the journey.
Absolutely, Jasper. And just remember, everyone, learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. Each day, you're learning something new, and every phrasal verb you understand and use is one more step closer to fluency. So don't rush, enjoy the process, and let each phrase bring you closer to the language and its culture.
Agnes, that's such a great reminder to see learning English, and especially mastering phrasal verbs, as a journey rather than something you need to rush through. I think this is where we can talk about another powerful tool, repetition. You see, the more you expose yourself to certain phrasal verbs, the more familiar they become. So, one way to reinforce your knowledge is by reviewing the same phrases, often in slightly different contexts. This way, you're always building on what you know.
Exactly, Jasper. Repetition helps everything stick. It's like when you're learning a song, after hearing it a few times, the words just stay with you. And with phrasal verbs, you can do this by adding them to your daily speech, even if it's just in your thoughts or journaling. Let's say you want to use carry on. Every time you feel like giving up on something, tell yourself, I'll carry on. It becomes a part of you through consistent use.
Yes, and there's a kind of satisfaction in seeing yourself grow more comfortable with these phrases. At first, you might hesitate or feel unsure. But as you keep revisiting the same ones, they start to come naturally, almost without thinking. For example, catch up might feel tricky at first. But when you keep using it, maybe in sentences like, I need to catch up with my friend, or I'm catching up on my work, it starts feeling effortless.
Absolutely, and it's such a confidence booster. Each time you use a phrasal verb without hesitation, it's proof of your progress. And even if you make a mistake, that's okay. Every error is just another chance to learn. Language is meant to be explored and enjoyed, not to be perfect all the time. So, to everyone listening, don't let the fear of mistakes hold you back. Let each practice session be a step forward.
So true, Agnes. Language is like a bridge we build one word, one phrase at a time. And as we're wrapping up this discussion on phrasal verbs, let's also talk a bit about setting personal goals. Think about the phrasal verbs that seem the most useful or interesting to you. Maybe make a list of 5 or 10 that you want to really focus on. Try using each one in different sentences, in conversations, or even just in your thoughts. Over time, these will become part of your language toolkit.
That's a fantastic idea, Jasper. And these personal goals don't have to be big. Small goals, like learning 2 or 3 phrasal verbs a week, can make a big difference over time. Consistency is key, and with regular practice, you'll be surprised by how many phrases you know by heart. And as you grow more comfortable, you'll start noticing phrasal verbs everywhere in books, in movies, even in casual conversations.
Exactly. And to make it even easier, you can try setting themes for your learning. For example, one week you could focus on phrasal verbs related to travel, like set off, check in, pick up, or get away. Another week, maybe it's verbs related to studying, like go over, keep up, and give up. Grouping them by theme makes learning feel more structured and relevant.
I love that approach. It gives your learning some focus, and it's easier to remember phrases when they're connected by a theme. Plus, it keeps things interesting because each theme brings a new set of ideas and situations. So, you're not just learning isolated phrases. You're expanding your vocabulary in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. And I think another powerful approach is to connect with people who speak English, either online or in person, if possible. Whether it's a language partner or a friend, conversation practice is invaluable. You'll start to hear and use these phrases naturally in real conversations. And don't be afraid to ask others for feedback. It's one of the best ways to grow.
Great advice, Jasper. And I'd add that speaking with others also introduces you to new phrasal verbs you might not come across in a textbook or a podcast. Real-life conversations bring out expressions and phrases that might surprise you. And if you're a little shy, remember that most people are really happy to help someone who's learning. It's all part of the language learning journey.
Yes, and remember, language is something shared. Every conversation is a chance to learn and connect. So, to everyone listening, embrace every chance to practice, whether it's chatting with a friend, writing a journal entry, or simply thinking in English. Learning phrasal verbs, or any part of a new language, is like opening a door to a new world.
And what a wonderful world it is! Jasper, English offers so many ways to express yourself. Phrasal verbs bring color and personality to your language, making it feel lively and full of character. So, keep exploring, keep playing with words, and keep adding new phrases to your vocabulary.
Absolutely, Agnes. To all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We're so happy to be a part of your learning process. Remember, language learning is a lifelong adventure, and every small step you take today is helping you grow and get closer to fluency.
Yes, thank you so much for spending this time with us. We're excited for everything you'll accomplish, and we're here cheering you on. Remember, it's all about enjoying the process and finding joy in each word you learn. So, keep going, stay curious, and let English open new doors for you.
Take your time, stay motivated, and keep practicing. You're already doing amazing. Wishing you all the best in your English journey, and remember that we're proud of every step you're taking.
Absolutely. Best wishes from both of us. Goodbye, everyone, and happy learning.
Goodbye, and take care.